The ordinary life. Jake Carter wasn't a hero. He wasn't a soldier, a scientist, or even a skilled technician. Jake was a janitor on the Zenith Orbital Station, a place buzzing with brilliant minds and state-of-the-art technology. Every day, Jake cleaned floors, polished control panels, and emptied trash bins, while others worked on groundbreaking projects that shaped humanity's future. For Jake, life on the station was predictable. He woke up, went to work, finished his tasks, and returned to his tiny cabin. The most exciting part of his day was watching the Earth spin below through a small window in the station's cafeteria. It was a view most people would kill for, but to Jake it was just routine. Late one night, Jake found himself alone in the station's maintenance wing. He was used to working odd hours, as most of his duties were easier to handle when everyone else was asleep. The quiet hum of machinery was the only sound accompanying him as he pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridors. As Jake scrubbed a stubborn stain on the floor, he noticed something unusual. Tiny, glowing particles floated in the air, shimmering like fireflies. At first, he thought it was some sort of technical glitch, a gas leak or a malfunction in the station's systems. But as he moved closer, the particles seemed to swirl around him, almost as if they were alive. "What the?" Jake muttered, waving his hand through the glowing mist. The particles reacted, forming a trail that drifted down the corridor. Jake hesitated. Following strange lights in the middle of the night wasn't exactly part of his job description. But curiosity got the better of him. After all, life as a janitor wasn't exactly thrilling, and this was the most interesting thing to happen in months. Pushing his cart aside, Jake cautiously followed the glowing trail. The particles led him to a section of the station he rarely visited, the restricted research wing. The door was supposed to be locked, but to his surprise, it slid open with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside, his heart pounding. The room was vast and dark, filled with strange equipment that he didn't recognize. In the center stood a large, dome-shaped structure covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly. Jake could feel his pulse quicken. This wasn't just any piece of tech, it was alien. Before he could process what he was seeing, the carvings began to glow brighter. The air grew thick with energy, and a low hum filled the room. Jake took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. The dome split open with a sharp crack, releasing a burst of light that forced Jake to shield his eyes. When the glow subsided, he saw her, a towering figure with scales that shimmered like molten gold. Her eyes, glowing a deep sapphire, locked onto Jake with an intensity that made him feel like his very soul was being read. "Human," she said, her voice echoing in his mind. "You have been chosen." Jake blinked, convinced he was dreaming. Chosen? Chosen for what? I'm just a janitor. The alien being stepped forward, her movements graceful and otherworldly. "You are more than you believe. The fate of your people rests in your hands." Jake's mouth went dry. This couldn't be real. Stuff like this happened in movies, not in the life of a janitor. Yet here he was, standing before an alien queen in a secret chamber of the Zenith Orbital Station. The glowing particles swirled around them, their light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Jake's mind raced with questions, but before he could speak, the alien raised a hand, silencing him. "You will understand in time," she said, her voice both soothing and commanding. "For now, you must trust me." Jake stared at her, his thoughts a jumble of fear, confusion, and disbelief. This was supposed to be another ordinary night on the station, but as the glowing particles danced around him, and the alien queen's gaze bore into his, Jake knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. The unexpected encounter. Jake stood frozen, unable to tear his eyes away from the towering alien queen before him. Her presence was overwhelming, like the weight of the stars themselves pressed upon him. The chamber, once filled with only the sound of his breath, now seemed alive with energy. The walls glowed, and the air hummed with an otherworldly frequency that vibrated deep inside his bones. "You," Jake's voice cracked. "You're real." The alien queen tilted her head slightly, as if studying him. Her expression was unreadable, though her eyes, bright and shimmering like twin sapphires, seemed to pierce into his very soul. Jake instinctively took a step back, the reality of the situation settling in. How could this be happening? He was just a janitor, a nobody. What could an alien queen possibly want with him? "You are more than what you think, human," the queen said, her voice clear and resonant, yet strangely calm. It was as if her words were not just spoken, but also felt, as if they traveled straight into his mind. "I have chosen you." Jake shook his head, trying to make sense of what was happening. Chosen? Chosen for what? "I'm just here to mop floors and empty trash. I'm nobody." The queen's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in them, a sadness that spoke of centuries, of battles fought and wars won, of sacrifices made. She stepped closer to him, her movements graceful but deliberate. Despite her imposing size, there was a strange comfort in her presence, like the stillness of space itself. "There is no such thing as just in the grand design of the universe," she replied. "You are not the man you believe yourself to be. I have seen your potential, human. You will lead your people through the darkness that approaches." Jake didn't know how to respond. His mind was racing, trying to comprehend the situation. The janitor. Chosen. Lead his people. Was this some sort of prank? No, it couldn't be. There was nothing about this that felt like a joke. Before Jake could voice any more questions, the alien queen raised her hand, and the room suddenly changed. The walls dissolved, revealing a vast, star-filled sky. The station, once a prison of sterile walls and artificial lights, now seemed insignificant against the backdrop of the cosmos. The stars stretched out endlessly in every direction, their light casting a soft glow on the queen's majestic form. "This is the reality of your world, Jake Carter," she said, her voice reverberating in the silence. "Your planet, your people, are not alone. And there are forces, far older and more powerful than you can imagine, that seek to destroy all you hold dear." Jake's heart raced as he tried to grasp what she was saying. The view was breathtaking, but the words she spoke were even more chilling. Forces. Destroy. What was this alien queen talking about? She continued, her gaze never leaving his. "The Xerath, a ruthless race of conquerors, are coming for your people. They have already begun their invasion, subtly, quietly. They have agents everywhere, even within your own station. And they will not stop until they have consumed all of humanity." Jake's stomach churned. The Xerath. He had heard of them before, famous for their brutal conquests of entire star systems. But they weren't supposed to be here, not now. Not on Earth's doorstep. "Why me?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just a janitor. There's nothing special about me." The queen's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Jake could have sworn he saw something akin to pride flicker across her face. "That is where you are wrong, human. You are special. More than you know. You are the key to saving your people, for I have seen your heart. You possess something that the Xerath will never understand. They are driven by power and greed, but you are driven by something far more powerful." Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something in the queen's words that stirred a long-forgotten part of him, something deep inside that whispered of greatness. But he couldn't shake the doubt that clung to him like a shadow. He was just a janitor. He didn't have the skills to face an enemy like the Xerath. The queen seemed to sense his thoughts. "You doubt yourself. But that is the first trial every hero must face. You will have the power to fight them, Jake Carter. But first, you must believe in yourself." Suddenly, the glowing particles from before began swirling around him again. But this time, they didn't just float. They converged around Jake, wrapping him in a cocoon of light. He gasped as the particles seemed to seep into his skin, filling him with a strange warmth. His body tingled as if every cell was being rewired, reawakened. "You are now bound to the artifact," the Queen explained, her voice gentle yet firm. "It will unlock the potential within you, but it is a power that must be controlled. You are now linked to me, Jake Carter. I will guide you, but the rest is up to you." As the light faded and Jake stood there, still trembling from the strange sensation, he felt different, stronger, fitter, like his body had been reshaped. But more than that, he felt awakened. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his mind, revealing something he had never known was there. But before Jake could make sense of the changes within him, a loud, sharp alarm echoed throughout the station. It was followed by an urgent voice over the intercom. "All personnel report to the emergency stations. Intruders detected. All personnel report immediately." The Queen's eyes flashed, her calm expression replaced by a look of determination. "It begins. The Xerath have arrived." Jake's heart skipped a beat. The invasion was real. It was happening now. And he, of all people, was somehow at the center of it. The Queen's form shimmered as she started to fade, her voice becoming distant. "It is time, Jake Carter. The fate of your people is in your hands. Remember, you are not just a janitor. You are their last hope." With that, she vanished completely, leaving Jake standing in the cold, dark chamber, now filled with a sense of purpose he had never known before. The alarms blared in the distance, and Jake knew one thing for certain. His ordinary life had ended. The real journey was about to begin. The alien threat. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as the emergency alarms blared throughout the station. The sudden rush of adrenaline made his body feel more alive than it ever had. But it wasn't just the alarm that made him feel this way. It was the strange power coursing through his veins, the quiet hum of energy that seemed to echo from deep within him. It was as if he had become something more than human. He could barely process everything that had happened in the past few hours. The alien queen, the glowing particles, and the promise of power he didn't understand. But there was no time to question it now. The station was under attack, and Jake was no longer just a janitor. He was part of something far larger than he had ever imagined. The corridors of the Zenith Orbital Station were bustling with activity as crew members rushed toward the emergency bunkers. But Jake didn't follow them. The Queen had told him something important. The Xerath were already inside, hidden among them. The station was compromised, and the only way to stop them was to take action. Immediately, Jake's mind raced as he moved quickly down the darkened hallways. The transformation he had experienced was still fresh in his body, and every sense felt sharper, more attuned. He could feel the energy of the station, the subtle vibrations of machinery, and the faintest shifts in the air as he walked. But most importantly, he could feel a faint, pulsating presence that was unlike anything he had ever sensed before. It was the Xerath. He didn't know how he knew, but there was no mistaking it. A dark presence had settled over the station, like a shadow creeping along the edges of his consciousness. The Queen had warned him about them. How they operated in the dark, how they hid in plain sight, how they used their intelligence and deception to infiltrate and destroy. Jake reached the station's security hub, the area where the station's most sensitive systems were monitored. He peered through the glass window into the control room, and his breath caught in his throat. The security guards were all lying on the floor, unconscious. Standing in their place was a figure dressed in dark armor, its face obscured by a helmet that seemed to shimmer and distort the light around it. The figure was human in shape, but there was something distinctly wrong about it. Its movements were too precise, too mechanical. Jake's heart skipped a beat. This was one of them. One of the Xerath agents. The creature, or whatever it was, turned toward him, sensing his presence. It raised its hand in a smooth, practiced motion, and the door to the security hub slid open. Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, but he stood his ground. The Queen had chosen him for a reason. He had no choice now but to face this enemy. The Xerath agent stepped forward, its eyes hidden behind a reflective visor of its helmet. "You should not have come here, human," it said in a voice that sent a chill down Jake's spine. The voice was cold, metallic, as if it didn't belong to a living being at all. "You are already too late." Jake's mind raced, but his body reacted without hesitation. He lunged forward, instinctively dodging the agent's outstretched arm as it tried to grab him. He felt the power within him surge again, faster and more controlled than before. The speed with which he moved surprised him. The energy in his body seemed to propel him forward, faster than he had ever been able to move in his life. The Xerath agent stumbled back, clearly caught off guard. It raised its weapon, a sleek, black energy rifle, but Jake was already on top of it. Without thinking, he reached out and snatched the rifle from its hands, twisting the barrel and sending the weapon flying across the room. The agent's eyes narrowed, and it hissed, revealing its sharp predatory teeth. "You dare challenge me?" It spat, its voice now full of venom. Jake's body was alive with power now. He could feel it, a strength unlike anything he had ever known. But more than that, he could feel the presence of the Queen in his mind, her voice guiding him, urging him to act. "Focus, Jake," the Queen's voice whispered, calm but firm. "You are not alone in this. Trust yourself." Jake's mind cleared, and the noise and chaos of the situation seemed to fade away. He locked eyes with the Xerath agent, who was now circling him like a predator ready to strike. Jake could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, but he also felt something else, something deep inside him that pushed away the fear and doubt. For the first time in his life, Jake knew exactly what he had to do. He moved with precision, his body reacting as if it were part of a well-rehearsed dance. His fists struck with the force of a hammer, his movements swift and fluid. The Xerath agent was strong, but Jake was faster. Each blow landed with a satisfying crack, and the agent's armor began to buckle under the intensity of Jake's strikes. The agent staggered back, and Jake saw his chance. With a surge of energy, he delivered a powerful blow to the agent's chest, sending it crashing to the ground. The agent's eyes blinked in surprise as it struggled to get back up. But Jake wasn't done. He grabbed the fallen agent's helmet, yanking it off with a swift motion. What Jake saw underneath took his breath away. The Xerath agent's face wasn't human at all. It was a grotesque mixture of organic and mechanical parts, a monstrous hybrid of flesh and metal. Its eyes glowed a menacing red, and its mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Pathetic," the creature hissed, its voice now full of rage. "You think you can stop the Xerath? You are nothing but an insect." But Jake wasn't listening anymore. His focus was unwavering, his mind sharp. He had to stop this threat before it could spread, before it could destroy everything. With a swift motion, Jake ripped a control panel off the wall and smashed it into the agent's face. Sparks flew, and the agent collapsed, its body twitching as the power to its systems shorted out. Jake stood over it, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with each breath. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Queen's voice filled his mind again. "Well done, Jake. But this is just the beginning. The Xerath will come in greater numbers. You must be ready." Jake nodded to himself, his heart still pounding in his chest. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. The real fight had just begun. The awakening. The clang of metal and the shudder of the station reverberated through Jake's body as he stood over the fallen Xerath agent, his breath heavy in the silence of the room. The threat was far from over. He knew this, felt it deep within his bones. But something inside him had shifted. The fear, the confusion, the doubts, they were all gone. In their place was a fierce determination and the undeniable knowledge that he had changed, not just physically, but at a level he could scarcely understand. Jake stood still for a long moment, eyes fixed on the Xerath agent, now motionless on the cold metal floor. The station's emergency lights cast a soft red glow over the scene, but his mind was elsewhere. His fingers tingled, his muscles ached from the energy exerted in the fight. But it was more than that. It was the strange, pulsing power that seemed to hum within him, beneath his skin. "You're not just a janitor anymore, Jake Carter," he muttered to himself, echoing the Queen's words from earlier. "You're something more." He had no idea how this power worked, but he couldn't deny that something had been awakened inside him. His senses were sharper now, every sound amplified, every flicker of movement more noticeable. His heart raced, and with each breath, it felt like he was becoming more attuned to the very fabric of the station itself. The Queen's voice echoed softly in his mind, a steady presence that calmed the storm of thoughts swirling around in his head. "Focus, Jake. You are not yet fully awakened, but the artifact has begun its work. The power inside you is vast, but you must learn to control it. Trust yourself." Jake closed his eyes, allowing her words to sink in. He could feel the power within him again, rippling just below the surface. It wasn't just physical strength. It was something more, something ancient, primal. It was like tapping into the collective energy of humanity, the will to survive and thrive, to defy the odds. He had never known such a sensation before, and yet it felt right. Taking a deep breath, Jake looked around the dimly lit room. The station wasn't safe. He knew that now more than ever. The Xerath had agents hidden throughout, infiltrating every level of the facility. His encounter with this one had been a wake-up call. If he was going to protect his people, if he was going to stand a chance against the Xerath, he had to harness this power. He had to become the protector the Queen saw in him. He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps now echoing with purpose. Every inch of the station seemed different to him. It was as though he could feel its heartbeat, a rhythmic pulse that synchronized with his own. The corridors, the walls, the very air around him, it all vibrated with a strange energy. And Jake realized that the station itself had become part of the battle. Jake didn't need a map to navigate the hallways anymore. He knew where he needed to go. It was as if the station was guiding him, pulling him toward the place where his transformation would continue. He didn't know how or why he knew this, but the certainty of it was undeniable. The Queen's voice returned, this time with a more urgent tone. "You must seek the core of the station, Jake. It is there that the true power of the artifact lies. Only by accessing the core can you unlock the full potential of the energy within you. The Xerath are already trying to sabotage it. You must hurry." Jake's heart beat faster. The core. He had no idea what it was, but he trusted the Queen. She had chosen him for a reason, and her words were always precise, guiding him in ways he could never have anticipated. The more he focused on her, the more the energy inside him seemed to grow, swelling with every thought and breath. As Jake navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the station, he began to notice something else. The flickering lights, the strange noises in the walls. These weren't just malfunctions. They were signs that the Xerath were moving closer. They were everywhere. And they were trying to disrupt the core. Jake's grip tightened on the metal railings as he reached a dead-end hallway, where a heavy, reinforced door stood before him. His instincts told him this was the right place, that whatever waited on the other side would either make him or break him. The door was locked, but it didn't matter. With a surge of energy, Jake slammed his fist into the door's control panel, sending a shockwave of force through the metal. The door groaned, and with a loud crack, it slid open. Beyond the door was a vast chamber, dimly lit by rows of machines humming with life. In the center of the room, a massive cylindrical structure stood, pulsating with blue light. The core. Jake could feel the energy of the core from the moment he entered the room. It was like a heartbeat, steady and rhythmic, a deep pulse that seemed to resonate within his chest. His whole body vibrated with it, as if the energy from the core was calling out to him. But he wasn't alone. From the shadows, figures emerged, More Xerath agents, their forms cloaked in shadow, their eyes glowing red. Jake's breath caught in his throat. These were no mere infiltrators. These were elite soldiers, and they had one purpose: to destroy the core. Without hesitation, Jake sprang into action. The power within him surged again, this time more intensely than before. His movements were a blur, faster and more controlled than he had ever thought possible. He dodged the first agent's strike, his body reacting on pure instinct. He swung his fist out, landing a blow that sent the agent flying across the room. Another agent lunged at him, but Jake was ready. He grabbed the alien by the arm, twisting and flipping it over his shoulder with a force that felt almost effortless. The third agent tried to use its weapon, but Jake was already on top of it, disarming it in a flash and sending the weapon spinning across the floor. The room became a blur of motion. Jake felt alive in a way he had never experienced. The power coursing through him was exhilarating. It wasn't just about strength. It was about precision, intuition, and control. With every move, every strike, he felt more in tune with the energy inside him. It was like a dance, one that had been choreographed for him long before he even knew the steps. The last of the Xerath agents fell, and the room fell silent once more. Jake stood alone, breathing heavily, his body still humming with the energy he had just unleashed. He looked around the chamber, his mind racing. The Queen's voice whispered in his mind again. "You have done well, Jake. But this is just the beginning. The core has been protected, but the true battle is yet to come. You are no longer just a janitor. You are humanity's last hope." Jake stood tall, looking down at the defeated agents. His body was sore, but his spirit had never been stronger. He had awakened, and now nothing would stop him from protecting his people. The journey was just beginning, and Jake Carter was ready for whatever came next. The first battle. The Zenith orbital station was quiet now, a false sense of peace settling over its halls. Jake stood in the core chamber, breathing heavily, his senses still tingling from the intense battle. The fallen Xerath agents lay scattered across the floor, their unnatural forms still and lifeless. But Jake knew this wouldn't last. The Xerath were relentless, and this was only the beginning. The Queen's voice echoed through his mind, calm and steady as ever. "You've done well, Jake, but this is only the first wave. They will come again, stronger, more prepared. You must prepare yourself for what is to come." Jake nodded, though he wasn't sure if she could see him. He hadn't been expecting the attack so soon, but now that it had happened, he realized something. He was ready. The power he had unlocked, the power the Queen had promised him, was real. He was no longer the janitor he had once been. The energy within him had awakened a force he didn't fully understand yet, but he could feel it. It was like a vast, untapped reservoir, and he was only beginning to scratch the surface. The Queen's voice came again, this time with a sense of urgency. "Jake, the Xerath are regrouping. They've learned from their failure. They will not make the same mistake again." Jake could feel the weight of her words pressing on him, but he didn't let the fear consume him. Instead, he focused. He wasn't sure how he had come to command the power that flowed through him, but something told him that the more he embraced it, the stronger he would become. He had to learn to control it, to use it not just for survival, but for victory. The doors to the core chamber slammed shut with a deafening thud, the security systems locking into place. Jake didn't flinch. He didn't have time for fear. The Queen had shown him what was at stake. Earth's survival was in his hands, and the Xerath were far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. A loud bang echoed through the chamber, followed by the unmistakable sound of boots on metal floors. Jake's pulse quickened. The Xerath were coming, and this time they would be ready for him. Suddenly, the doors to the chamber exploded open with a burst of force, sending shards of metal flying in all directions. Jake instinctively rolled to the side, his reflexes sharp and quick, the energy within him propelling him into motion. Through the smoke and debris, he saw them. 3 more Xerath agents, their bodies encased in sleek black armor, their eyes glowing with a menacing red light. They moved with an unnatural precision, their every movement synchronized, almost as if they were a single entity. Jake's heart raced, but he was ready. The power within him surged again, and this time it felt different, more focused, more controlled. The Queen's voice echoed in his mind, a steady, reassuring presence. Use your instincts, Jake. Trust yourself. The energy you have is part of you now. You know how to fight. Jake didn't hesitate. The first Xerath agent lunged at him, its claws slashing through the air. Jake sidestepped with ease, the agent's arm missing him by inches. He didn't wait. He struck, his fist connecting with the agent's chest with a sickening crunch. The agent staggered back, its armor dented, but it recovered quickly, raising a weapon that crackled with energy. Before it could fire, Jake was already on the move. His body moved like a blur, faster than he could ever have imagined. He ducked under a blast of energy, his feet skidding across the floor as he launched himself into a powerful spin. He drove his fist into the second agent's side, sending it crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. The third agent didn't wait for Jake to recover. It launched a series of rapid strikes, its movements fast and precise, but Jake was faster. He dodged and weaved, using the energy within him to anticipate every move. With each strike, Jake's confidence grew. His body was a weapon now, not just a vessel. He grabbed the third agent's arm as it reached for another weapon, twisting its limb with a force that felt almost effortless. The agent cried out in pain as its weapon fell to the ground. Jake didn't pause to listen. He delivered a crushing blow to the agent's head, knocking it unconscious before it could react. The first 2 agents had regained their footing by now, and they advanced on Jake together. But he wasn't worried. The power inside him surged again, flooding him with energy. He could feel the strength in his muscles, the speed in his movements. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was controlling the fight. With a powerful leap, Jake launched himself at the first agent, crashing into it with the force of a freight train. The agent was sent sprawling, its armor dented and cracked from the impact. Jake didn't stop. He grabbed the second agent by the arm, twisting it behind its back and throwing it to the floor with a bone-crunching slam. The agent struggled, but Jake was already on top of it, delivering a devastating punch to its head, knocking it unconscious. As the last agent crumpled to the floor, Jake stood, breathing heavily but unshaken. The fight had been intense, but the energy within him had kept him sharp, kept him focused. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was a warrior. And this was just the beginning. Jake's body still thrummed with power, but there was no time to savor the victory. The Queen's voice was already in his mind again. They are not done, Jake. The Xerath are relentless. But you are becoming stronger. You can feel it, can't you? You are no longer just reacting. You are controlling the energy. This is the key to your victory. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the energy within him hum, alive and pulsing. He had learned something important today. He wasn't just a pawn in this fight. He was the key. The Xerath could keep coming, but he would be ready. He could feel it now. The path ahead was clear. Jake stood tall, looking down at the fallen agents. His heart was still racing, but it was no longer fear that drove him. It was the knowledge that he was ready for whatever came next. The battle had only just begun, and Jake Carter was determined to see it through. The final stand. The Zenith Orbital Station was no longer just a place of science and innovation. It had become the front line in humanity's battle for survival. Every hallway, every room, every corner now carried the weight of that responsibility. Jake Carter felt it every moment, the constant pressure, the burning need to protect everything he had once taken for granted. The weight of it was heavy, but it was nothing compared to the power inside him now. The power he was still learning to control. The Queen's voice, steady and unrelenting, guided him as he made his way through the station. "Jake, the Xerath have regrouped. They are coming in full force. They know you are here, and they will do everything in their power to stop you. You must be ready." Jake didn't need to be told twice. His body hummed with the energy from the artifact, the energy that had been unlocked deep inside him. It was not just power. It was a part of him now, as natural as breathing. He could feel the pulse of the station, feel the Xerath's every move, every step they took toward their goal. They were relentless, and they would stop at nothing to claim victory. But Jake wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was humanity's last hope. He reached the central command hub, a massive chamber at the heart of the station. From here, the entire station was controlled. Its systems, its defenses, its communications. It was the final line of defense against the Xerath. If they breached this room, all would be lost. Jake knew this, and he felt it in every fiber of his being. Inside the command hub, the air was tense. Station personnel had barricaded themselves inside, but their faces were grim. They knew the stakes. They had seen the destruction that Xerath were capable of. And now they were counting on Jake. They were counting on him to save them all. The doors to the hub slammed shut as Jake entered, and he was met by the worried eyes of the crew. Among them was Captain Samantha Hayes, the commanding officer of the Zenith Orbital Station. She had seen the chaos unfolding on the station's scanners, but she had also seen Jake's actions during the previous attacks. She knew what he had become. She knew he was their best chance. "Jake," she said, her voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. "We're ready to fight, but we need you to help us power up the station's defense systems. The Xerath are coming, and they won't stop until they've destroyed us all." Jake nodded, his eyes locked with hers. "I'm ready," he said. He wasn't just ready to fight. He was ready to lead, to protect, to save them all. The crew set to work, initiating the emergency defense protocols, but the station's systems were struggling. Power surges had damaged key components, and the Xerath were drawing closer, their ships now visible in the distance. The countdown to their arrival was ticking down, and Jake knew they didn't have much time. Every second mattered. The Queen's voice came again, calm and certain, cutting through the growing tension in Jake's mind. "Jake, it is time. The power within you is nearly fully awakened. You are ready to unlock the full potential of the artifact. You must take control of the station's main power grid. It is the only way to ensure the defense systems are activated in time." Jake closed his eyes, focusing. He could feel the pulse of the station's power grid, the lifeblood of the entire facility. It thrummed with energy, raw and untapped. But Jake had no fear. He had learned to trust the power inside him. He could feel the energy surge as he focused, guiding it, channeling it through his body. The room around him seemed to shift as the power of the station responded to his call. He could feel the circuits, the wires, the very core of the station aligning with his will. It was as if he were one with the station itself. The crew watched in awe as Jake's body seemed to glow with an ethereal light, the air around him crackling with energy. The power in the station surged, and the defense systems flickered to life, the shields around the station shimmering into existence. Jake opened his eyes, his body still humming with energy. He felt stronger than ever, the power inside him now fully awakened. But he knew the real battle was still ahead. The Xerath would come, and they would stop at nothing to destroy the station. But now, Jake had the power to defend it. "They are here," the Queen's voice warned him, and Jake's eyes snapped to the station's viewport. In the distance, the Xerath fleet was closing in. The massive ships, sleek and deadly, loomed like a swarm of locusts, their weapons primed and ready. Jake felt a surge of energy course through him. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. The final stand. The first wave of Xerath ships opened fire, their weapons unleashing a barrage of energy blasts toward the station. But Jake was ready. The defense shields flared to life, absorbing the first wave of fire. The station trembled from the impact, but it held firm. Jake clenched his fists, his body glowing with energy as he focused on the incoming threat. He could feel the power of the station's defense systems, the power of the artifact, all surging within him. He was ready to fight, ready to lead the charge against the invaders. "Activate the countermeasures," Jake commanded, his voice steady and strong. The crew scrambled to obey, launching a barrage of counterattacks against the Terrath fleet. The station's cannons fired, sending blasts of energy into the incoming ships. The battle was fierce, but the station's shields held strong. But the Xerath were relentless. They adapted quickly, launching their own counterattacks, sending waves of smaller ships toward the station. These ships weaved in and out of the station's defenses, their speed and agility making them harder to hit. Jake didn't hesitate. He reached out with his mind, drawing the power of the station into himself, channeling it like never before. He could feel the hum of the station's energy, the very heartbeat of the station. It was his to control. With a roar, Jake unleashed a massive wave of energy, directing it straight at the incoming fleet. The Xerath ships were caught off guard, their shields faltering under the intensity of the blast. Several ships exploded in a burst of fiery debris, their wreckage scattered across the void. But Jake knew this wasn't the end. The Xerath were cunning, and they would not give up so easily. He felt their presence, their hunger for destruction. They were coming for him. The final battle had begun, and Jake Carter was ready to face it head-on. He had unlocked his true potential, and now it was time to unleash everything he had. For humanity. For the future. For the survival of all that he held dear. The final stand was upon them, and Jake would not let the Xerath win. Not today. Humanity's hero. The battle raged on outside the Zenith orbital station, the clash of energy weapons and explosions echoing through the cold expanse of space. Inside, Jake Carter stood tall in the central command hub, his body still crackling with the power he had learned to wield. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. His hands were steady, his mind focused, but his heart still beat with the urgency of what was at stake. The Xerath fleet had been beaten back, but they weren't done. The Queen's warnings echoed in his mind. They will keep coming. They will stop at nothing. She had said the battle would continue, that the true war for humanity's survival was only beginning. Jake had been tested, but this final stand was unlike anything he had faced before. Jake looked out the viewport, his gaze fixed on the remnants of the Terrath fleet. A few broken ships drifted in the distance, the debris floating like forgotten memories. But the true threat wasn't gone. It had only been delayed. The crew around him worked tirelessly, keeping the station's systems running, coordinating the defense efforts. They had seen him fight. They had witnessed the transformation. The janitor turned protector, turned hero. Now they looked to him, not just for leadership, but for hope. Captain Samantha Hayes stepped forward, her face as determined as ever, but with an unspoken weight in her eyes. "Jake," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We've held off the Xerath, but they know we're here. The fleet is regrouping, and it won't be long before they come for us again. The station is taking heavy damage, and we're running out of time. We need a solution." Jake nodded slowly. He had learned everything he could about the Xerath from the Queen. They were relentless, strategic, and always evolving. He could sense their next move, feel their desperation to finish what they had started. But he wasn't afraid. He had tapped into something more than power. He had tapped into the very will of humanity itself. The Queen's voice echoed softly in his mind. "Jake, the Xerath are now aware of your strength. They are coming for the core. If they destroy it, all will be lost. You must go to the heart of the station and make your final stand. It is the only way." Jake turned to face her, feeling the weight of her words sink in. The core, the heart of the station, the power that fueled everything. If the Xerath got to it, there would be no hope left. He couldn't let that happen. He couldn't let the sacrifices made so far be in vain. "I'll stop them," Jake said, his voice filled with resolve. Captain Hayes met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and admiration. "You're our only chance, Jake. Be careful." He didn't respond with words. He simply turned and began to walk toward the door, his mind already focused on the task ahead. The crew parted to make way for him, their eyes full of hope. But Jake couldn't afford to dwell on that. He had a mission, and he was determined to see it through. As he made his way through the station, Jake felt the presence of the Serath closing in. The energy inside him surged, responding to the threat. He could feel the movements of their forces, could sense the way they were converging on the core. They were moving faster now, more desperate, but Jake was ready. The artifact, the power it had given him, had become a part of him. He was no longer just a man. He was something more. He was the guardian of humanity's future. The deeper Jake moved into the station, the more intense the presence of the Serath became. He could feel their minds, their hatred, their desire to destroy. It was as if they were closing in on him, aware of his every move. But Jake didn't falter. He reached the final door, the one that led to the core. He didn't hesitate. With a thought, he activated the door's control, and it slid open with a low, resonating hum. Inside, the core was alive with energy, a pulsing light that filled the room with an almost tangible power. The station's heart. And standing before it, in the center of the chamber, was the Serath leader. A towering figure, cloaked in black armor, its eyes glowing red with malice. The creature turned toward Jake, its mouth twisting into a cruel smile. "You are the human who has become a threat," the Serath leader growled, its voice deep and rasping. "You think you can stop us? We are the Serath. We are inevitable." Jake's body thrummed with energy, his mind clear and focused. "I've already stopped you once," he said, his voice steady, unshaken. "And I'll stop you again. This station is humanity's last line of defense, and I will protect it." The Serath leader sneered, raising a hand toward Jake. "Then prepare to die." With a flick of its wrist, a surge of energy blasted toward Jake. But he was ready. He tapped into the power of the core, his body moving with lightning speed as he deflected the attack. The energy from the Serath's blast ricocheted off his body, striking the walls with a deafening crack. The station trembled, but Jake remained undeterred. The Serath leader advanced, its movements swift and powerful, but Jake was faster. He dodged every strike, every blow, his body reacting with the speed and precision he had never known before. He was no longer just defending. He was attacking. He was taking control. With a roar, Jake launched himself at the leader, his fists crackling with energy. He struck with the force of a star collapsing in on itself, each blow sending shockwaves through the chamber. The leader staggered back, its armor buckling under the sheer power of Jake's strikes. "You are nothing," Jake growled, his voice full of determination. "You will never destroy humanity. We will fight. We will survive. We will rise." With one final, earth-shattering punch, Jake drove his fist into the Serath leader's chest. The impact shattered its armor, sending the creature crashing to the ground, its body twitching with the last remnants of life. The leader's glowing eyes flickered, then went dark. Jake stood over the fallen enemy, his chest rising and falling with each breath. The core pulsed with energy, the station's heartbeat steady once more. The threat had been eliminated. Humanity had survived. As the lights of the station flickered, signaling the end of the battle, Jake's mind cleared. He had done it. He had fought, not just for survival, but for the future of his people. The weight of the journey settled on his shoulders, but there was no more fear, no more doubt. He had become the protector the Queen had seen in him, the hero humanity needed. The Queen's voice came once more, this time softer, almost approving. "Well done, Jake. You have proven yourself worthy. Humanity is safe, for now." Jake looked out at the stars, the quiet hum of the station now filled with peace. He had become more than a janitor. He had become a hero. And though this chapter had ended, he knew that the story of humanity's survival would continue. He would be there, standing tall, fighting for what was right. The journey had just begun.